Awesome. We are recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Atlanta Vue.js Meetup. I'm Alex, and I am the host of it today. Today we have a great speaker with us. We have Raymond. I'm going to go over some housekeeping stuff first, however. First off, we have a code of conduct. This is a harassment-free environment. We want to make sure that people feel welcome here, and that we're here to talk about Vue and to have conversations about views and about Vue and discourse about Vue, and let's not be mean and crotchety to each other. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. You can find out more at our code of conduct site. Yeah. So next meetup we have as a speaker, you. We need speakers. Please, if you have something that you want to talk about, please email me and let me know, or message me on Twitter or Meetup or wherever. That's fine. Please let us know. We would love to have you talk, no matter how long the talk is. That is sort of my housekeeping for today. Our speaker, like I said, is Raymond Camden, and Raymond is going to talk to us about what the heck is Vite.js. So Raymond, take it away.
Absolutely, thank you. And Alex, thank you for having me again. And because I'll forget, please ping me later. I know two people who could be good speakers.
Awesome, I will absolutely do that.
So I will share my screen, but before I do that, Alex and I have been talking a little bit before the meeting started. And it's a very small group, so I feel safe talking about, although it's being recorded and 10,000 people are going to watch it. But I'm here. I had some weird feelings. I love code. That's why I'm in this job. So I tend to get emotional at times. And I've had some weird feelings about things in the Vue world, not bad feelings, just weird feelings. And because this is such a small group, I feel comfortable sharing those feelings with y'all, just because I'm curious if it's just me, and it could possibly be just me. I am feeling a little bit concerned about where Vue is going. And that's not to say Vue is going in a bad place, not at all. But one of the reasons I fell in love with Vue is that it felt very easy to use and extremely approachable. I spent a lot of my development career working in a language called Cold Fusion. It's a proprietary, now there's an open source version, but it's an app server. And one of the things that was really good about it, especially back in the early days of the web, is that it was very easy compared to PHP and not .NET, classic ASP. That community ended up having a lot of non-traditional programmers, English teachers, philosophy, et cetera. Just because of its environment, it welcomed people who would not identify as developers. And I thought that was a great thing, and that something that Cold Fusion didn't get enough credit for. I feel the same way about Vue. Looking at Angular, looking at React, they all look like very fine platforms. But Vue has always felt much more welcoming in terms of people who may not consider themselves to be experts. And back when Vue 3 was started to be talked about, which was like 2 years ago, maybe. I know it's been a long time in development, which is totally fine. They had that original snafu with the configuration changes, and everyone thought that's the way it was going to be. And they kind of had to backtrack and say, no, it's going to be optional and all that. But I know, like, for me, like, that, not a red flag, like a yellow flag of what's happening with Vue, with this platform that I love. When Vue 3 was done, and I put that in quotes, it was very weird because one of the first things I did was go to the Vue website expecting to see Vue 3, and it wasn't there at all. And I later found out that, well, yeah, we're going to wait until the libraries are updated before we update the documentation. But Vue 3 is still the version, but we're not going to document that because of the other things. And all of that feels valid, but because I'm not very smart, because I'm also a bit scatterbrained. So I'll learn something and then I'll jump to the next shiny object. And when I come back after we learn stuff, and because I spent a long time in developer relations, I kind of like laser focus on when I go to your product, your service, whatever, what I see, I always approach it as like someone new. And if I was a new developer and I'd heard about like Vue 3 being released and go to the website, that'd be a red flag for me, actually. Like everybody on Twitter, they were all talking about Vue 3 last week, and it's nowhere, or it's not, it's not the core documentation. So I not leaving Vue at all. But for the last, like, I guess, a year or so, it's been kind of a weird feeling for me. And I'm just, as something that I love, I'm hoping that it's going the right direction. And, with this small group, I'm curious if anyone else has felt that, or if you feel totally fine, then that's cool too. But I would love to get anybody's opinion who wants to chime in.
Yeah, I think so. My having come from enterprise application development and weird small little company development and like agency development, right? I've kind of done the gamut over the last couple of 3 years. The thing that I'm running into with a lot of this is um it's sort of Vue 3 got pushed out, and then none of the libraries were really ready to catch up to it. And I've seen this pattern before. I've seen this happen before. And I don't think that this is going to be quite as drawn out as it, but this is very reminiscent of Python 2 to Python 3. And I've said that repeatedly. This, like, I'm very happy about the things that Vue 3 are introducing. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. We're going to be able to do a lot of really cool things. Don't build an application with it yet. Like, if you need an external library, don't build an application with it yet. And it was like that with Python 2 and Python 3, is that Python 2 was this very stable, very reliable code base. And it took them 15 years to kill it.
Really?
Yes.
I'm just now kicking into Python, so this is all news to me.
Yeah, Python 2.7, like, they just killed it last year. It was supposed to, like, and Python 3 came out like 15 years ago. And so it was one of those where, like, there wasn't a good way to transition from 2 to 3 in Python. There was some fundamental, like, underlying changes of like how language constructs worked, like strings and stuff worked, right? So there was some like very like low level things that changed. And Vue 2 to Vue 3 is feeling very reminiscent of that for me. It is not identical, because having now transitioned a Vue 2 app to Vue 3, it was mostly painless. There were a couple of weird little gotchas here and there, and I raised some issues about that. But it's one of those where it's like I knew going in there were going to be a couple of weird issues like that, and I knew what I was looking for. And so, like, the messaging isn't quite there yet. And so, we have Vue 2, which is extremely stable as of April 27th, 2021, when this is going out. It's very stable, it's very reliable, it's very robust. And Vue 3, which is very robust, mostly stable. Yeah, no, I'll say it's very stable. Vue 3 is very stable at this point. But the support for it just is not there. I'm gonna get kicked off the podcast for saying all of this. And so and so yeah, like I agree. Like, they're not like they haven't, when you type npm install Vue, you don't get Vue 3, you get Vue 2. and because they're still labeling it as Next, it's not there yet. And so there's going to be this transition period. I think it's going to take another year. It's going to take another year and a half at least, before we really start getting people going, yeah, no. So now let's make a Vue application, and the default is Vue 3. We don't go back to Vue 2. That is now legacy, right? Because but it's going to take a while. And I know that, having recently talked to Evan, I know that they are doubling down and focusing on the tools to migrate from 2 to 3. And now that Vite, which you are going to talk about, is more stable and done and released, he's moving his focus back to Vue and getting everything into shape. So I think we'll see more movement over the next year. But yeah, I share your concern of it's not. There's something weird. It's not quite there yet.
There's a smell.
Yeah. So, anybody else thoughts?
Well, I do come from that audience you were speaking about, Raymond, which is definitely not a programming background. I started off in UX and design and worked basically from web development and working into software applications, and now do work for an enterprise company. And we were actually just changing over and remodeling our entire tech stack when Vue 3 was about to come out. And so it was just about the right time when they did release it that we had a chance to make that decision, and we went against it just because simply it wasn't there. We wouldn't know how to support it if we wanted to. So that was definitely a big decision for us, because I mean, as a large company, you're investing a lot, and if you're not keeping up with the most modern, the most up-to-date code, that could set you back. But I do believe if Vue sticks to its character, and as you described it, exactly how a lot of us feel about it too, is that Vue is easy to use. It is very inviting and great to work with. But if it does stick to its character, then I think migrating to Vue 3 will hopefully not be a stressful crash and burn situation for trying to get all your code over. You just hope for the best and then see what happens.
Yeah, it feels like my baby, and someone's moving the baby around with one hand, and you don't. Oh, that implies that there's bad maintainers. It's my baby is moving, whether it's a great 100 hands or whatever. I want to make sure the baby lands okay. But again, it feels good to know that other people, again, not misgivings per se, just worry. So, all right. Sorry for that very, very long preamble. I do have slides. Let me just move some stuff over here.
Yeah, no, this has been a great conversation, and I think it's one that it's important that we do talk about this.
Absolutely. Sweet. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I did say we're going to talk about Vite today. I'm Ray Camden. I work for Adobe as of about a month and a half ago, working in document services API. So if you ever needed to automate anything with PDFs, like adding pages, taking pages out, converting to PDF, generating PDFs from templates and stuff like that, we have APIs for that, and I would love to share them with you. Hit me up on Twitter or send me an email at my blog. And outside of that, you should definitely follow me on Twitter, because I only tweet important development stuff, nothing political or fun or serious or anything like that at all. All right, so what is Vite? The TLDR of what it is. It is a very fast build and scaffolding tool, which is not at all what I thought it was before I started preparing for this presentation. So I'm actually really happy I volunteered to talk about this. But I would definitely call it more of a scaffolding / build tool, and I'll be showing examples in a minute. And it is extremely fast. I am kind of jaded, so when people say something is fast, I'm like, yeah, sure. Maybe it's 5% faster. I won't notice. No, Vite is like shockingly fast. It is not a Vue tool. I kind of started off that way, but it's actually framework agnostic. And pretty much every demo that I'm going to show will be vanilla JS, because that's a bit quicker and simpler, but you can absolutely use it and not even be concerned about Vue. It does not replace the Vue CLI. I have specifics on Vue CLI and Vite and what the future is coming up later in this presentation. By the way, with this very small crowd, definitely feel free to unmute and stop me if you have any questions. All right, so the opposite of the TLDR, the not TLDR. So it is a build scaffolding tool created by Evan Yu, creator of Vue.js, hopefully you know. And it was built to kind of work on the performance issues. And I had not really noticed the performance issues of the Vue CLI until I started to use Vite. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, it is kind of slow. I'll also say I am a big user of Windows Subsystem for Linux. This is a feature that Microsoft added a couple of years ago, where you essentially run Ubuntu on your Windows machine. When it first came out, there were file I/O issues, and those file I/O issues only would be an issue when you had a lot of files moving around. And if you've done anything with NPM, then you know it moves a few thousand files around. So any tool that worked with a lot of files was kind of like doubly hurt by that performance issue. Microsoft has absolutely fixed it since then. So it's definitely nice and quick, but Vite kind of blows me away in terms of how much quicker it is. And again, it's not just a Vue thing. It works with multiple frameworks, Vue, React, etc., and vanilla JavaScript. And for all of those, you can work with TypeScript as well. I have been playing with TypeScript for years since it came out. I have not fully adopted it yet, mainly because I've never had a good tooling solution for me that worked outside of a framework. So for example, I use TypeScript with Ionic and mobile apps. But if I wanted to just play with TypeScript, I never had a good setup for me. Vite actually has me looking at it as a way to play with and use more TypeScript in my day-to-day development. And it has a plugin architecture, so you can actually work with even more things than what I have on screen there. So let's talk about that speed. And let me just begin by saying that this is stuff from people much smarter than me. I have been working on the web since about 94 or so, and I am a very strong intermediate user. I am not a great advanced user. So for example, in DevTools, I don't tend to spend much time in the performance tab because it confused the heck out of me. In my research for this presentation, I kind of got it. It made sense. But to me, the proof was in when I ran the CLI, and it just blew me away. But so my understanding of what was happening, the Vue CLI makes use of Webpack. And one of the things that Webpack would do is that it would translate all of your dependencies before your code went to the browser, such that the browser could work with things that it may not have native support for, like import blah from blah. Browsers did not support that. So Webpack would fix that all for you. But because it was doing that, as your project grew, there was a growth to how much time Webpack had to spend on doing that. Vite just says, screw all that. There's really good browser support for ES modules now. So we can, let the browser do most of the work. And it turned out that helped a heck of a lot. Mostly. So what's interesting is that they found that while it did help a lot, it had some side effects. So for example, because the browser could handle importing a module when you loaded that particular view, it ended up being a lot more HTTP requests against the server. So Vite does a bit of syntax sugar to make that a bit easier. Evan Yu has a presentation where he spends about 20 minutes going into the particulars of the hacks. When I watched that presentation, I said, okay, you're smart. I don't have to worry about it. Thank you for fixing that for me. But if you want some more details about the kind of patching that Vite does for things where it'd be a bit harder on the browser, then his video is pretty good at that. From that video, he shares some great timings, and I can confirm, and hopefully you'll see when I run the demo, that it is incredibly faster. So for example, starting 10 times faster, building twice as faster. Notice that thing in the middle though. The actual page load time sometimes go a little bit higher. That's because Webpack was building everything for you and just dropping a big giant glob of stuff into your browser. With Vite relying on the browser to load stuff when it needs to, that means as you load a page, it may need to do some more work. It may need to fetch those things for you. So, I look at that and I say, okay, one thing is, 50, 60 milliseconds slower, but things like my start time are way, way, way quicker. So that is absolutely a trade-off that I'm okay with. Because we are relying on the browser, that does kind of change what you'll need on the browser. So Vite does require nodes, so you'll use npm to run it. I'll show that in a second. I don't like to just kind of throw that out there because not everyone uses npm and node comfortably. So just keep that in mind that you will need that to work with Vite. It does require modern browsers that support ESM, and I was kind of blown away by how well it was supported. 93%, even Safari on iOS, or as I call it, the modern IE6. But it actually runs there. Good news is that if you do need to support older browsers, they document what you need to do to make that work. I'm not going to worry about that today, but just know that that is something that you can do if you need to worry about that. So to use Vite, you will use the command npm init at Vite.js/app. It will prompt you for some things. If you don't want the prompts, you could pass arguments. If this syntax is new to you, the npm init and then something, it was to me. I've used npm init-f to just quickly drop a package.json. I had never seen npm init something like that. And basically it goes over the wire to run an application like npx from the repository. Basically you're running a remote CLI without having to actually install it. So that was a bit weird to me. And my muscle memory was a bit off at first, but once you get used to it, it's not too difficult. So I'm going to run some examples real quick and make that a bit bigger. Let me clear my screen. So I'm going to show you an example. And it's the Vite.js app. And I'll make that just a little bit bigger. There we go. All right. So again, I'm not passing any arguments, so I get asked all the questions. It's going to begin by asking me a project name. I'm going to call this Foo1 because I'm very creative. I'm going to pick a framework, and in this case, I'm going to do vanilla. And I'm going to stick with JavaScript. And I should say, by the way, this is just what it's scaffolding. So Vite supports compiling TypeScript. So even though I'm starting with JavaScript, I can easily drop in TypeScript files as well, and it will just work for me. And it's done. So obviously it skipped the npm install. Let's see how long that takes. Done pretty darn quickly. If I do npm run dev, I'll show you the results. Localhost 3000. You see that build. I'm not even sure if we're able to see how quickly that ran. but let's go in here and go to localhost 3000. And I'll show you some of the code behind it. Let me go in my trash folder, foo1. So you have node modules, obviously, you don't need to go in there. The things I want to point out, index.html, this will be your main entry point to every Vite application. You can modify this if you want, but that's just the default. And it is loading my code in via a module script and main.js. And if I look at that, it's doing essentially just 2 lines. So I am importing CSS. Again, Vite does what it needs to make that work for me. And it's doing just a simple inner.html change. And I'm going to say, hello, Atlanta, save it, get rid of the link. I don't need documentation, and go back. And it did hot reload, but I don't want to bother moving my windows over so you can see that working. And if I were to go in and modify the CSS, because I am all about the style, I work at Adobe, we will do bright Adobe red. This is not the actual Adobe red. I should probably learn it. But now I see red. So again, working extremely quick. It is just vanilla.js. I'm not actually doing Vue or anything. But let's see an example of that. I'm going to go back out, and I'm going to create, using the Vue CLI, a Vue create, app name. We will call it Vue View. I will pick Vue 3, and I will let the CLI do what it needs to do. And this is traditionally the point where I'd be embarrassed because it's going slow, but I want it to go slow so you can get an idea of the difference. And it's doing what it needs to do. It's npm installing. Again, you saw Vite did not run npm install for me. This is the Vue CLI is. And it's doing what it needs to do, and it's done. So if we go into Vue and do npm run serve, we can see about how quickly that is. It's doing some stuff. All right, that was not terribly bad at all. Again, not having used Vite until recently, I was fine with that. And again, WSL on Microsoft on Windows used to be a lot slower, so that was a bit more painful. But in general, I was okay. I'm going to repeat the process, but this time use Vite, and we are going to do -- template. Basically, tell it to make a Vue 3 application, and the project will be Vue Vite. And it was supposed to pick the right template, probably my fault. And that's it, done. First time I ran it, I thought I broke something. I go in here, do the npm install. It did skip that, to be fair, but this is adding 5 seconds, if that, npm run dev, and done. So again, I tend to not care so much when people say they've improved things, because typically they've improved it like 5-10%, and I think practically that won't matter. This has really kind of blown me away with just how darn quick it is. So that is scaffolding an application. You can do, thank you, Microsoft Edge Dev. I do have do not disturb on, but it thought it was more important. More things you can do with the CLI. You can create a build that doesn't require Vite anymore, and you can actually serve from that particular build. I will show back in my first application, which was foo1. I should not have named everything foo. That was a mistake. npm run build. I end up with a dist folder, and I can see my assets there. If I do run serve, I'm essentially running that compiled version on localhost 5000, and that should be the hello Atlanta. Don't make the mistake I did and forget that you're running the built version and modify your source files and wondering, why it's not working. I did that only once, I promise. But so typically, npm run dev is what I would use as I do things. If I was pushing this to something like Netlify or whatever and needed it to tell it what to do to create the build version, I'd be npm run build, and I would tell Netlify to serve from the dist folder. All pretty simple, and I just showed that, so I won't leave it again to go in I won't demo that because I just showed it. So some more things that Vite provides out of the box. One of the things it does is it fixes bare module imports. I did not know what that meant. It does not involve bears, unfortunately, but it's a problem that I didn't recognize going back and forth from Node and the browser. But if you did npm install a library, it's not going to be available as just bare library. The browser does not know about Node modules. But because this is so common, Vite essentially looks at this, recognizes that it's a Node modules file, and will actually rewrite it such that it knows the proper way to load that folder, that library for you. And that is a bare module import. Again, Vite just fixes that for you. It does the hot module replacement. Again, if I had my screen set up with my editor on one side and my browser on the other, it would kind of show you that reloading without losing state, and that's the important thing. Again, currently only Vue.js, React, and Preact, but I believe it could be extended to do more than just that if you're working with something else. TypeScript is being done via ESBuild, not TSE. I am a TypeScript noob. I had no idea what that meant, but ESBuild is apparently much faster than TSE. So basically, you're just seeing, every possible thing that they could do to make things run quicker. They have really put a lot of thought into it and trying to make that as quick and painless as possible. Again, I'm a TypeScript noob. In some of my testings, I created a quick TypeScript file and did the bare minimum of typing. But all I know is that I didn't have to think about it and it just worked. So anything that makes my life easier, I am a fan of. Also supports JSX. I hate JSX, so I won't show you a demo of that. But that's something that you like. It supports making that work for you. So yay, JSX. And CSS imports, it also works with PostCSS and CSS modules, things that I have not used myself, but if you are fans of those, Vite just makes that work out of the box. And in the first demo that I showed, you saw where I had that CSS import and it just kind of worked. Honestly, like I feel very weird importing CSS into JavaScript. I mean, it seemed to work just fine, but I'm not sure why I would do that over dropping a link import in a link statement to my HTML. If using the import meant that I would get the reloading without losing state, then I would do it. I still feel weird about it, but I would do it. So one thing that you may need to work with are static assets. And it turns out Vite has a couple different definitions about static assets. So I'll kind of start and kind of gradually build up. If you import something that's not supported, like importing a JavaScript library, it knows it knows how to work with it, it knows how to work with CSS. But like if you try to import a graphic, it will actually give you the URL to that graphic instead, which is weird. But let me show you. Let's go into my demos, get out the trash, and I will show you the result, even though it's not too exciting. VM run dev localhost 3000. I'll show you the result, and then I'll show you the code. All right, nice, cute picture of a cat. But the way that this is working is that basically I imported the image, and it's just a raw asset, it's a raw .jpeg file. And the way that it imports it is imports it as a URL. And if I go back in my browser and look at my console, I will see the URL /JPEG. Get that a little bigger, like that. And because I got that URL, then I was just able to use it in like regular code. So that is one example of doing that. You can also force it if you want to load something that would normally be processed. Like let's say I want to load CSS, but I don't actually want it as part of my DOM. I want the URL to that. I can literally just append a query string and Vite will say, oh, you really meant the URL, I'll give you that back. It also has support for loading the source, for loading web workers, and basically it's all just appending a query string to that particular URL. So if that is something that you need to do, like you want to load import asset.js, but you don't want to actually have that as something that's executing, you just want that URL, that is how you would do it. And again, Vite just picks up on that. You can also do that for JSON data. I will show an example of that because that kind of clicked for me. JSON 1, I believe. There we go. npm run dev. Again, I'll run it and then I'll show the code. It's not terribly exciting. I'm basically importing it and just dropping into my DOM, but that looks like so. Import data from data.json. That name could be anything at all, but once you do that, you have it in there. And again, like that's something where normally I would have like a DOM content loaded event handler and do a fetch request to get my JSON data. And this feels a lot slicker and a lot quicker to use. So again, if you can't tell, I kind of was not expecting to like Vite, and I'm liking it more and more. And for non-Vue reasons, just general web dev reasons, it's definitely exciting me quite a bit. That is importing static assets. You can also do glob imports. If you don't know what a glob is, it's basically an ability to load multiple files based on a pattern. So the way that works, basically I do import.meta.glob and then pass in the pattern. So image/star, for example, for everything under the image folder. This is actually lazy loaded. So it's not actually loading everything. It's instead getting the information ready such that when you are ready to load that data, you have access to it. If that sounded weird, I apologize. It sounded weird to me as well until I played with it a bit and saw it actually working. There is also an eager version, which will actually load everything at once. So the use case for this, I can imagine you're loading a large directory of resources, let's say 99 or so, and you know that you have a lot, and so you want to work with 10 at a time. Excuse me, real quick. If I knew that I wanted to programmatically, I swear I put on do not disturb. Wow, thank you, Dell. If you knew that you had this large set of assets and you want to kind of programmatically like work with one slice at a time, then you would want to use kind of the default glob. If you knew that you had something where you needed access to everything immediately, then you would use glob eager instead. All that sounds weird. Let me actually show you some running code. And go back. All right, and what I essentially did was build an image gallery here, and the code for this main.js. So I'm doing the import metaglob. I'm pointing to a folder of images I made, and then I'm going to iterate over each of them. And for each of them, I'm going to get that URL and basically just create a large HTML string that I end up dropping into my DOM. Now, the reason I mentioned that is kind of lazy loaded. If I go back here, you could see, let me scroll up. When I initially, let me clear that, run it again. Yeah, these kind of weird module things, basically until you actually use it, and I used it, back to my source code, in my for loop, it's not loaded until I iterate over each of those and work with it. It's not an array where you can do like for so-and-so to length. I realized that pretty quick. You have to do the foo in something to go over every value in there. Again, I apologize if that sounds a bit weird. It was a bit weird for me as well. But once I got it working, it seemed to work pretty well, and it's like a pretty cool feature. So third type of static assets, truly static stuff. Anything that you want just as a resource. You're not going to be importing it or doing anything weird with it. It's just a plain vanilla, simple asset. You drop in the public folder. The only thing that you want to keep in mind is that anything in /public will be available as /. So I have a demo of this, but it is really simple. I called it static2 npm run dev, and I'll show you the end result. It's just one image, but I want to show you the file system instead. Get over here. I have my public folder. I have my cat image there. In my main job, in my HTML, I reference it as just as if it was in the root directory as well. So just something to keep in mind. Things that you don't want to use in your JavaScript, you want as basic resources, drop in public, but access them as if they were root. And again, hopefully that made sense. Some more information. I talked about the Vue CLI and Vite. So from what I heard from Evan, the plan is to look at what Vite did well, how it made things quicker, and kind of backport that into the Vue CLI. Vite is not going to replace the Vue CLI, but what you will see is the Vue CLI being improved by what they have learned building Vite. I don't know if there's any time frame on that, but that's the general plan. So the cool thing for me as a developer is that I'm using the Vue CLI, and then one day it gets a heck of a lot faster, and I'm just happy. So that I think is good. If you want to know about taking a project scaffolded by the Vue CLI and translating that so that it works with Vite, there's a great article, and I have linked to it from my slide deck. I will share my GitHub repo for the slide deck so you can get all the assets. But that article walks you through the steps, like 5 tweaks you do. So you can do it in like 10 minutes. And then at that point, you can start using Vite instead of the Vue CLI to work with your Vue application. And if you're into the Jamstack, which I very much am, there is a VitePress Jamstack. It's the spiritual cousin to VuePress, using some of the Vite stuff. It looks like it's interesting if you are a VuePress user. I'm not a fan of VuePress for the Jamstack. A lot of people are, but so if you do like VuePress, then you should take a look at VitePress. It's definitely not 1.0, it's in development, but you could find that pretty exciting. So to learn more, obviously the website Vite.js.dev, and they are on Twitter at Vite_JS. And with that, for our large crowd, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, on the app scaffolding, when you were importing as a Vue project in Vue CLI, you have the option for manual, and you could select a number of apps to add in addition to it. Now, I know you did not run a npm install, but would that, or is that a case for Vite and being able to pre-set up packages?
No, as far as I know, at least in my experience, and let me go back to my trash folder real quick. As far as I know, you don't get control over like router or whatever like that. Vue.js app, and we'll call this test 9. And I pick Vue. Yeah, the only question is JavaScript or TypeScript. So that's it. So I'm sorry.
Can you control which Vue? Vue 2 or Vue 3?
It's just Vue 3.
It's just Vue 3. Okay. Okay. And just a comment referring back to the lazy loading. What do you think prefetch might adapt better to that description? Seemed like a prefetch method when you were discussing it.
I don't know. So when you say prefetch,
Hmm.
I think of the things I could do in my HTML to tell the browser to preemptively load stuff. Is that what you mean by prefetch?
Yeah, well, basically, it's anticipating what you're going to pull, the user is going to access, so it brings it or preloads it and ready or anticipation for you to be able to access those. So, and similar to what you were discussing is just like in Vue, where you could prefetch the components through your Vue router, so you don't have to import every single Vue router through there, or sorry, every single component. The prefetch will just load it for you and then import it when needed.
I would say no, because my understanding is that prefetch, it's recognizing you're going to need it. It does the HTTP request so that when you ask for it, it's there quicker.
Mm.
My understanding is that when I do just the glob, it's looking at the file system. It's finding all those resources. It's giving me essentially a handle to them, but not doing that network call because it doesn't want to be eager, which is why they offer the eager version. I think the eager version does what you're saying. Like I want all that crap ready so that as soon as I use it, it's loaded. The regular version is almost like giving you like a pointer, like an unloaded pointer. Like I know all those 90 images, I know what their names, I know where they are, but I'm not going to load them until you actually request them. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
And I think it would be actually pretty easy to figure that out. You just do the build, and then you can check the HTML file and see if it has any prefetches in it or preloads in it.
Yeah.
Cool. Anybody else have any other questions? Ryan, do you have any more questions?
Uh, well, in the future, you brought up the Vue and Vue CLI and Vite. Do you think this is adaptable with current Vue CLI projects? If let's say we're building off of Vue CLI right now, but if I were to introduce Vite, would there really be any complications of working with other applications or switching between the two?
Yes.
So that thing I linked to at the end.
Yeah, the
Oh yeah, right here. Yes, this for Vue 3 anyway. This blog post, I did click right. Yeah, it's yeah. This link should work. Yeah, this talks about what to do. So it's stuff like removing the CLI service. Like when I looked at this, it looked like maybe a half-hour process, and then when I was done. Now I don't think you can go back if you follow this process. I don't think you can go back and forth. I think you're committing to using Vite if you do this.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So and some of it is that it also, to jump in on this one, it depends on what you have set up in Vue CLI.
Mhm.
So if you have a lot of like custom Webpack plugins that you're using, your migration path from like Vue CLI to using Vite is going to be very, very not fun, and not nice, because Vite is based around a different bundling system called Rollup. And so it's incompatible with Webpack, right? It's a completely different architecture. And so some of it is you're going to you're going to have issues if you're going from Vue CLI to Vite, because it's two separate things. And so yeah, it may be like it really depends entirely on how custom you made your build process in Vue CLI, right? If you have 18 million different plugins, you're gonna just have a bad day, and I'm sorry. But if your Vue config file is like, I've changed the title, you should be fine.
Unfortunately, not. Doing an npm install on our file is like waiting 10 minutes and coming back from
Go make
lunch.
lunch, come back.
Yeah. So, but it does look good. Definitely something to keep in mind and test out.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? Cool. Yeah, I will double up on what Raymond said, and I will add my own flavor to it. Vite is amazing. It looks amazing, and Raymond, you did a fantastic job showing it off because you there are things in there that I did not know that it did. And I find it to be uncomfortably fast.
Yeah, I thought it was broken.
Yeah.
I really did. Like, yeah, no, it didn't work.
I've shown it to other people and they've had the same reaction. They're like, but where was the build step?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's done. But where was the build step? No, it's done. So yeah, no, it's super exciting. It is where the future of bundler file serving development is going. And it is super cool. So thank you, Raymond, for coming and speaking to us. I appreciate it greatly. And if nobody else has any other questions, I'm gonna stop recording.
Just want to say thank you, and it was an excellent presentation.
Thank you. You're welcome, etc. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.